FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Financial Survival Network is brought to you today by Orin Resources, a junior exploration company with the appetite of a major. It's hot on the trail of the next globally significant discovery, creating enormous potential upside for you, the shareholder. Orin is one of the most aggressive exploration companies pursuing high-grade, scalable gold and copper deposits and has a premier 7-project portfolio, including its 2 flagships, Committee Bay in the Arctic and Sombrero in Peru. Orin's unparalleled technical team and highly experienced management has a history of success in advancing and monetizing exploration assets. No wonder Orin's been called one of the best in the junior exploration sector. Orin trades on the TSX and the NYSE under AUG. To learn more, go to orinresources.com. That's AURYN resources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 4/25/19. Well, if you've been watching the Obamacare drama unfold, you've probably seen that recently the case is back in court and the U.S. Justice Department, the Department of Justice, rather than defending a lawfully passed statute, has come out against it, agreeing that with the opposition that Obamacare is, in fact, unconstitutional due to the elimination of the individual mandate. One other thing that's come up recently on Obamacare, 1.6 million less people have health insurance since 2016. My, what could be going on? Hey, as always, we invite you to become a part of the show and email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, person who is an expert in healthcare policy, has written books about it. The latest, The False Promise of Single-Payer Healthcare. I'm talking about Sally C. Pipes. Sally, you've been on this case for a long time. I should also mention that you're the head of Pacific Research Institute, which is a San Francisco-based think tank. So, Sally, you've been on the case here for quite a while. Are we getting to the end of the national nightmare, otherwise known as Obamacare?
Well, I don't know. I think things are actually getting worse because, as you know, there are 19 candidates seeking Democratic nomination for the presidency, and all of them, I don't know what, actually, I guess today, 20 with Joe Biden entering the race, and I'm not quite sure where he's going to come down on this, but most of the candidates out there, from Bernie Sanders on down the list. Bernie, of course, has his new Medicare for All bill, which is even more comprehensive than his 2017 bill. And he has 4 of the people running for the nomination, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Kamala Harris from California, all co-sponsoring his Medicare for All bill. And then you have a lot of the other candidates pushing what I call stepping stone approaches to single payer, whether it's a Medicare buy-in at 50, Medicare X, public options, Medicare for America, all of these things. So while I think Obamacare is on the ropes, and we've seen, very high premiums, high deductibles, now the number of uninsured under Obamacare has gone up because 1.6 million people, dropped their coverage because of the high premiums and high deductibles. I think, we're really in a very precarious situation because Obamacare hasn't worked. And now the talk is, and the polls are showing that the American people want Medicare for All or single payer, which would mean no private coverage, and the government would be totally in charge of our health care. It's a disaster.
Yeah, it certainly is a disaster. But, I don't buy the polling necessarily. I think people want a solution. And when they ask them a question and they propose single payer as a solution, they say, of course we want single payer, or Medicare for All. But the reality, I think, is something quite different. But this is the distortion through the media lens. What about the concept, though, if the Supreme Court does, in fact, strike down Obamacare, what's going to happen then, Sally?
Well, I mean, right now, as you know, the judge in Texas ruled that in that case, which was brought by 20 Republican attorneys general, he ruled that Obamacare was illegal. because they're getting rid of the individual mandate made the whole law unconstitutional. Judge O'Connor. That has now gone to the appeals court in the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans. So we're waiting to see, how that turns out. But it was interesting that the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, was against the case, but has recently switched and said they're in favor of the case, and that the individual mandate makes the law unconstitutional. Although the HHS, Alice Azar, Secretary of HHS, and Mr. Barr, the Attorney General, are not in favor of this move that the Department of Justice made. That case, the appeal case, is being brought by a group of attorneys general from Democratic states, led by, of course, California's Mr. Becerra, who is very, very liberal. So we'll see. I know the DOJ has asked the court in New Orleans, the Fifth Circuit, to bring this case to up by July. So they've asked to step up the timing. So it's going to be very interesting. I think that whichever way it goes, I think definitely this case is going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it should be good that we have Mr. Kavanaugh on the case, on the court now, as well as Justice Gorsuch. So we shall see. But it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting. So switching back, we know how awful and how potentially devastating single payer is, but you can never really emphasize enough how bad this really is. How bad is it, and why should you be against it?
Well, I think the thing is that, as you know, I mean, if people think about programs that are run entirely by the government, they kind of shudder. And in fact, in the latest Kaiser poll, where 71% of people they polled, and I agree with you what you said about polling, agreed that they supported Medicare for all and that healthcare was a right. But when you ask the same people, well, if this means a tax increase, and it also means that you would lose your private coverage, that support goes down to 37%, because I think a lot of people polled think, oh, Medicare for all sounds like a great idea. But I'm one of the 170 million Americans who has employer-based coverage, and I really like it. So that's very interesting. The thing with Medicare for all, meaning there is no private coverage at all, this is going to mean a variety of terrible things for Americans. And I think the examples in Canada, where I'm from, and the Great Britain, the National Health Service, really need to be put out there, because with the government full takeover of the healthcare system, we're going to see long waiting lists for care, just like in Canada and the UK. The average wait today in Canada from seeing a primary care doc, getting treatment by a specialist, is 19.8 weeks, almost 5 months. Care is rationed. And so the older you are, the less likely you are going to be able to get care, because they will have actuaries figure out what is the value in dollars of your life and what is the cost of that care. And if the cost of care is more than what they value your life at, you won't be eligible for care. There will be tremendous tax increases. And we've seen with Bernie Sanders' latest S1129, which is more comprehensive than his previous 2017 bill, because he's adding free long-term care to his plan. The Charles Blay House at the Mercatus Center costed it out at $32 trillion over 10 years. And I think that number is low, because no government program ever costs what people estimate it to be. And, he is in his plan, which would eliminate private insurance. He's also added in addition to the long-term care, free dental, free vision, free drugs, and free hearing care. Those things aren't even part of the Canadian healthcare system, where you see these long wait, ration care, and the average Canadian family pays $13,000 a year in hidden taxes to pay for sitting on a waiting list. So these plans would be a disaster. We're going to see on April 30th, next Tuesday, the Democrats, for the first time in the House, are going to hold a hearing in the Rules Committee on Representative Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill that she has out there. Hers is even more comprehensive than Sanders' bill, because she wants to phase in the single-payer system within 2 years. Bernie says it can be done over 4 years. So the American people need to know that these are the consequences that they will see. And if they think about it, what do they think about going to the DMV, when the DMV is the monopoly provider of car insurance? If you look at the post office, many people, because there is competition against the post office now with DHL, UPS, and FedEx. So, I use one of these services if I want to make sure something can get there. But if the government fully takes over the healthcare plan, as Sanders, Jayapal, and all these people are talking about, that won't be possible.
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, these things are pipe dreams to think that the government can offer a service, a higher quality service for less money to more people than the market can is absurd. We've seen it fail over and over again. Every sector of the economy that is really in trouble, you just have to look at the government and you see why, whether it's healthcare, because they're so ingrained with Medicare and Medicaid, whether it's college student loans, student loan debt, where they become the only lender to students for student loans under very draconian terms for many, and so many other things. You just have to look to the government putting its thumb in the pie, and what's going to happen here. And yet people want to believe, Sally, they really want to believe that somehow the government has a magic bullet.
Well, Kerry, what we've seen with the report that just came out from the Medicare trustees on Medicare, and they have shown that Medicare Part A, the hospital part of the Medicare program, will be now bankrupt by 2026. And just think of the number, I think it's 10,000 baby boomers are joining the ranks of over 65 every single day. So this program is going, bankrupt today. And as we've seen today, there are going to be many more people on Medicare. And so it's going to put more pressure on Medicare. So how in the world is a single payer Medicare for all system going to be able to survive? As Charles Playhouse pointed out, if we doubled all of the personal income taxes and the corporate taxes, it wouldn't be enough to cover the cost of Bernie's plan, which also includes new taxes, a new 4% income tax, a new tax on the wealthy, an estate tax of 77%, a new tax on large financial institutions, an increase in the payroll tax. All of these things, are going to be anathema to the American public, and particularly when they realize what it's going to do to their ability to get good health care.
Yeah. It's obvious. It's as plain as the nose on your face, and yet they don't want to accept it. Just like they don't want to accept that Trump didn't collude with the Russians. They want to believe that there's some magic box in Washington that takes a little bit of money and turns it into a lot and, just improves everything. But it's so unrealistic. You would think that people would figure this out by now.
Well, you absolutely would. But I think, the left, and particularly the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, has really spent a lot of time telling the American people that, you as a citizen or as an illegal are entitled to all of these programs. And we're building an entitlement society where, in particular, young people, millennials, don't see why they shouldn't have free healthcare, free college education, no loans, all of these things. And they don't realize where the money comes from. Government doesn't have money. We, the taxpayers, provide the government with the money to provide for these programs. And I think the American people need to realize, even when Bernie Sanders was on that Fox town hall, I think it was last week. I mean, the people were, the crowd, the people in the audience were cheering Bernie on. Do you think healthcare is a right? And they're cheering, blah, blah, blah. Well, there was no one saying, well, hold on a minute. What does it mean when the government provides your healthcare? You're going to lose your private coverage. Your taxes are going to go up. You're going to face long waits, just like in Canada and the UK. They needed to have somebody to say, hold on, these are the realities of what it means when government takes over your health care fully.
Yeah, but there's no more grown-ups here in the Democratic Party, Democratic Socialist Party. There's no one, if Joe Biden is our hope here, he hasn't come out for Medicare for all yet, but I'm sure he'll have something awful. It'd be interesting to see
what he says.
He'll have something awful. You know it. It's not going to be, it might not be quite as awful as Bernie care, but it's going to be awful. Let's face it.
Well, and I think, we were talking about this earlier and we talked about it before. I mean, I think President Obama, with Obamacare, well, he said, he wasn't, supporting single payer when he brought in Obamacare. He wanted to reduce the cost of care. He wanted to eliminate the number of uninsured. But because he realized people like their private coverage, he didn't want to go there. But prior to being president, he supported single payer. And now that he's out of office, he supports single payer. And I always felt that the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act was really a stepping stone approach to single payer.
Yeah, it was basically designed to fail.
Right.
So where does this leave us here, Sally? What are we supposed to do?
Well, I think that the issue is the Republicans, unfortunately, seem nervous about talking about healthcare and about we need to achieve universal coverage. You need universal choice. We need all kinds of different types of plans, just like we have in every other part of our lives. Why should young people, the young invincibles, have to buy a healthcare plan with all of these 10 essential health mandates like in vitro fertilization, maternity care, all of these things? People should be able to get a plan that suits their needs. For those people, there are only about 6 million people in the U.S. in the private market who have pre-existing conditions. The majority of these people, when the Democrats talk about 120 million with pre-existing conditions, most of them are in the employer market and they can't have their insurance taken away, nor can they have the price be pushed way up. So we need to have choices for people, and this will lead to universal coverage. But I think people like you, people like me, people that need to educate Republicans and the American public about why taking over the healthcare system would be a complete disaster for their own healthcare, because people don't understand. If something that's free sounds like a great idea, but you have to tell them what the consequences are. A, it's not free, and what it'll mean for your care.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's it. I think you hit the nail on the head. Education. The Democrats are always saying education is the key to everything. And then you find out quickly that when you really start examining many of their half-cocked, insane projects, they don't really care about education. It's all about power and having their way, right? Exactly.
It's about moving our, Bernie Sanders on the Fox town hall said, "Oh well, when it was another event that he did, and a young student from I think Harvard said her parents came from Russia to get away from socialism."
Correct.
He said, "Well, I'm not talking about the socialists, about Russia, but Bernie Sanders and his wife went to Russia on their honeymoon back when it was the Soviet Union. That's exactly what he wants for this country."
Yeah, exactly. So he really was disingenuous. You know what? He out and out lied. Right? When you get down to it, he just lied about who he is. I mean, he's there. You see the movies. He had the home movies of him visiting Russia. He thought it was a worker's paradise. And, good for other workers, but not for him. He's been in the worker's paradise, the United States Senate and Congress for his entire life. The guy never had to meet a payroll, never had to worry about where his next paycheck was coming from. He's a total and complete fraud. And he's spurning other frauds. Hopefully, Sally, this is going to blow up in their faces. We can only hope and pray. Hey, any questions or comments out there about what Sally said or anyone else you've heard on the show recently? Just email me, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page Financial Survival Network. Sally, tell us where we find your work.
It's available on our website, www.pacificresearch.org.
All right, pacificresearch.org. We'll have a link to it in the site. We always appreciate you coming on, Sally. Keep up the fight.
I will. And you too. Thanks, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.